Hi, and welcome once again to Ivy English. I'm Karen.
And I'm Chris Gorski.
Today is October 20th, and we're on page 57 in your magazines. Today we're going to hear part one of a two-part article entitled
The Rocket Boys Who Reached for the Stars.
Now, I am guessing you have no idea who the Rocket Boys are because I certainly didn't know, and Chris tells me he didn't know either.
No, I did not. In fact, we're kind of talking about a really important, yet something I find incredibly boring part of history, the Cold War.
I don't find it boring. I refer to it a lot in my mind because there's a temptation among older people to think of the good old days. But every time I think of the good old days, I remember how tense it was politically. All this stuff that happened, some of it I was aware of when I was in grade school. Other things I didn't learn about till later in life. There has never been a period we could call the good old days in human history. Never.
I should explain my position further. As a student of history, there are a lot of really interesting things that happened. And when we get to the point of post-World War II, where the United States and the USSR, what we call Russia today, the Russian Federation, there's roughly a period of about 60 years where it's the US and Russia were mad at each other. So everything else around you was just a big heaping pile of trouble. And it was because the US and Russia were trying to influence things, and there were all these difficulties because of it. It's just like, hey, can we just work together? Because history will be a lot more interesting for me.
Yeah, actually, I found it pretty interesting, but I was also scared as a kid, and I realized that adults were trying to scare us with things like nuclear shelters. There may be a nuclear war.
There's a lot of interesting propaganda. I will give you that. If you keep your eyes open and you're like, okay, both sides were trying to influence the way you think, and you look at it like that, there is a lot of kitschy. A lot of kitschy propaganda that is obviously aimed at making you feel a certain way.
And I have to say, I found the same thing when I was in Taiwan in the 70s. There was this whole shadow of war that was still cast over Taiwan in that period with all kinds of slogans that were painted on buildings and walls. Yeah. So it was quite similar. It lasted longer in Taiwan. Okay, we're going to stop there. We're going to let the article speak for itself. So again, our title is The Rocket Boys Who Reached for the Stars. Now we're going to have to find out who the Rocket Boys were. Homer Sonny Hickam Jr. is a teenager from Coalwood, West Virginia. A large percentage of the town works in the coal mining industry, including his dad. Sonny's father works long hours and expects that his sons will follow in his footsteps one day. Sonny has bigger dreams, though. After watching the Russian satellite Sputnik sail into space, he dreams of building rockets for the U.S. government. Sonny's father, however, doesn't share his son's visions for the future. He thinks Sonny lacks talent and won't amount to much in life. As a result, he pays more attention to his other son, Jim, who is a gifted athlete.
Sonny's friends share his passion for rockets, and together they decide to form a fictional missile agency. Coalwood residents are skeptical, and nearly everyone in town believes that their silly agency will fail. The only person that encourages them to follow their dreams is their chemistry teacher, Miss Riley. She assigns them special projects so they can practice designing rockets. The boys pour their hearts and souls into these assignments and start to improve their rocket building skills. They convince a local blacksmith to help them create metal parts for their rockets. After some failed attempts, they produce a special mechanism that speeds up launch times and makes their rockets fly faster.
Word soon spreads about their invention, and reporters travel to Coalwood to find out more about the boys' rockets. Hundreds of people gather in a field to witness the boys launch a rocket. Sonny's father is reluctant to attend, but his wife convinces him to go. The rocket takes a long time to blast off, and many people believe it malfunctioned. However, it eventually blasts off high into the sky. For the first time in Sonny's life, he sees that his father is proud of him. Now, I react strongly emotionally to this sentence. We'll come back to it. It's at the end of
There's two sentences that really catch me.
Okay, and that's one of them.
Yeah.
We'll come back to it when we go over the article a second time more carefully. Okay, so these are Rocket Boys. Now we know from what we've heard so far that they are boys who were really, really interested in missiles and rockets, and they designed one themselves, although the people around them didn't have much confidence in what they were doing. But they reached for the stars. That means they had a very high goal, and they kept striving to that goal regardless of what people said. Our first sentence, Homer Sonny Hickam Jr. is a teenager from Colwood, West Virginia. Okay, and that's pretty obvious. But you may not know much about West Virginia, and the name of the city also tells you a lot about what's going on here. I just listened to a YouTube video about the poorest states in the U.S., the people with the lowest overall income levels. And West Virginia is one of the very, very poorest states in the U.S. We can call it dirt poor.
Yeah, when somebody is dirt poor, that means you're really extra poor.
That's because they have relied very, very heavily on coal mining in order to support themselves, to make enough money to live. And coal now is going out of fashion.
Yeah, it's not a popular thing to be using in the U.S. It's still popular in some parts of the world. China probably being the most notable, although that's also quickly phasing out. But it's unfortunately for those people in those places that want to live in their hometowns, which is something I understand. I come from a city that there's not much going on. I had to leave in order to find more opportunities. You know, when those businesses are no longer viable, sometimes you need to leave, and those people don't want to do it.
That's right. So if people are mining less coal, because if you burn coal, that contributes to global warming. So we're trying to move towards more sustainable kinds of fuels and power sources. So we're trying to reduce our reliance on coal, but that means the places that mine coal, they are now left without any kind of widely available employment, and that's true of West Virginia. So let's just go back to our sentence in our article. So the name of our main character here is Homer, and that makes me think of
The Simpsons, of course.
The Simpsons, Homer Simpson. And then they put Sonny in double quotes. When we do that with a name, it usually means that's his nickname. That's what most people call him. So his name is Homer Hickam Jr. That means his father is also named Homer Hickam. And after he had a son with the same name, who he gave the same name, the father will be called Homer Hickam Sr. And the abbreviation is capital SR period. Homer Hickam Jr., Homer Hickam Sr. And Homer Hickam Jr., the son, has a nickname, and they put it in double quotes. That nickname is Sonny. So a lot of people just call him Sonny instead of Homer, which now makes us think of Homer Simpson. Okay? And he is a teenager. They put it in the present tense. He's probably not around anymore, and he's certainly not a teenager.
Not a teenager anymore.
So when we are narrating, this is called the narrative present. When we are telling a story, we often put it in the present tense, and that's what they're doing here. So it makes you feel like you are right in the middle of the story. So they use the present tense. They say he's a teenager, and he's from West Virginia. What's the name of the city? Colwood. And West Virginia is probably best known, first of all, for its very beautiful country, the mountains. It's very beautiful. John Denver sang about West Virginia.
I was just thinking John Denver.
That's right. But when you see the name of the city, you know what's going on. It's the other thing West Virginia is famous for, and that is coal. The name of the city or the town, it's probably a town, I've never heard of it, is called Colwood. So the main thing they do there probably is mine coal.
Did you have a nickname growing up?
Yes, I did. It was
K.
K-A-Y-K.
K-A-Y or just the letter K?
No, it was based on the letter K, but I was called K. But it was only my family who called me that. When I would sign my name K, my classmates would say, "That's not your name. Sign your real name." But that's what I was called in my family, by my mom, by my sister, whatever. And my middle name, I didn't used to like it, but I think it's fine now, is Ray, R-A-E. So sometimes I was called K-Ray.
K-Ray, that's good.
Not K-Ray,
good.
K-Ray.
K-Ray.
Yes.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
My people used to just use my last name, Gorski. In fact, that still happens a lot. People won't say Chris. They just call me Gorski. Some people just have names that people like to say, and Gorski's one of them. I tell people my nickname is Chris Coolski.
Oh, that's very cute. Oh, yes. And it's so in character. Yes. But I don't think it's just you. I think that grade school kids, they often call each other by the last names.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, Stefan. Yeah, we called each other by our last names, too. It was both endearing and also kind of a show of power, calling you by your last name. All right. So he was a teenager from this place, this very poor place, probably. Next sentence, a large percentage of the town works in the coal mining industry, including his dad. Now, we have just been talking a lot about this. So his dad has a job in what is mainly a one-job town, probably. Mainly the only big thing where you can easily get work is the coal mining industry. And Homer's father does that. He's a coal miner.
I like that the word to mine and the mine, it just means to dig in the earth. And if you listen to us regularly, you know we often talk about Latin and Greek roots of words, but this does not come from Latin. In fact, to mine actually comes probably from like Welsh or Irish, those kind of Celtic languages, because the Romans and Greeks were not famous for their mining. They didn't have a lot of things to dig out of the earth. So we have just a regular old British Isles kind of word here.
That's interesting. I didn't know that, but the Romans certainly imported things from other places.
They certainly did.
They didn't do
They knew how to do that.
Yeah. Next sentence. Sonny's father works long hours and expects that his sons will follow in his footsteps one day. Now, for us, it's hard to imagine that a father would want his son to do this very dirty, dangerous work. People often end up with a condition called black lung. It's a disease of the lungs that cannot be cured. It just gets worse and worse as you get older from inhaling all of that coal dust.
Boy, and that is a descriptive name too, black lung.
Yeah.
I remember hearing about that on the news.
That's right. And that's what you get from smoking as well. So if you're a smoker, you know that you should not do it. It's really, really bad for you. Okay, so the father has got this really difficult life, but it's the only life he knows. And parents often want their kids to do what they do. And that's true of Homer's father, to follow in his footsteps. Sonny has bigger dreams, though, and thank goodness for that, I would say. That means he does not want to be a coal miner. He wants to do something bigger, something he feels would contribute more to humanity. After watching the Russian satellite, Sputnik, sail into space, he dreams of building rockets for the U.S. government. Now, in English, we say Sputnik, but in Russian, it's more like Sputnik. I can switch back to the English pronunciation. So, at that time, the Russians had sent a satellite into space called Sputnik, and this really inspired Sonny. So he wanted to build rockets for the U.S. government. Now, the two governments were enemies, as we were discussing earlier, and this really inspired him. It gave him a purpose that he wanted to work toward. The next sentence, Sonny's father, however, doesn't share his son's visions for the future. Now, this will often happen when the father just doesn't have the background to understand what it is his son wants to do. He doesn't really have confidence in his son that he can do it. So he's thinking, come on, just be realistic. You're going to need to support your family. Get a real job.
So it's hard to understate how important Sputnik was on kind of the American psyche. Space TV shows were like really common, but especially after Sputnik, it just became an extremely central concept for a lot of people. And this ending N-I-K became part of like the daily lexicon, the daily kind of slang words of the day. The one that still hangs around is a neatnik.
A neatnik, but at the time they were beatniks.
Beatniks, there are a lot of this. There are actually a lot of those words. Most of them have died out, but I agree. Beatnik and neatnik are the two that hang around. A beatnik is like a cool person. A neatnik is a person that likes to keep things very clean.
And they were called beatniks because they were part of the beat generation of the 1950s. There were authors like Allen Ginsberg and others who wrote poetry that was really, really kind of wild and full of all kind of terrible behavior and things. They were people who felt that, well, we're free. We don't have to follow society's rules. So they were called beatniks. And this was, like Chris said, a lot of words were invented that ended with nik, as a person who does something or thinks some way.
Almost like a verb ER kind of ending.
Right, exactly. Except for it's got a funny feeling about it. It's somewhat humorous.
Yeah.
All right. He thinks Sonny lacks talent and won't amount to much in life. Now, it's easy to be judgmental about this, but parents easily form judgments about their own children based on their own standards.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where keeping an open mind is best.
But it's hard to do when you haven't been trained in open-minded thinking. It's really hard because you think your parents go into parenthood thinking, my kids are going to be like this, that, and the other thing, and it's basically like I am. And when they aren't, it's a terrible shock. I have to tell you from experience, they're going to be their own people. They're not going to be the people you...
They're their own people. That's exactly right. They are not you.
They are not you. And every parent has to learn that lesson anew. Last sentence of the paragraph. As a result, he pays more attention to his other son, Jim, who is a gifted athlete. Now, that's something I think a blue-collar man can relate to easily, and that is being an athlete.
God, I hate this sentence.
I know a lot of men
this sentence.
do. Men who like books and men who strive for something like law or teaching or whatever it is, they will hate this sentence too. I have these male friends who absolutely hate competitive sports.
I'm personally not like that. But the idea where like his son is like, Dad, I want to be a scientist. He's like, no, that's bad. My son, though, he's an athlete. Boy, I love that.
It's really hard to accept.
That bugs me so much. Yes.
I know. That's because we're different kinds of people.
Okay, let's continue to our next paragraph here. Sonny's friends share his passion for rockets, and together they decide to form a fictional missile agency.
That's amazing that a kid would have the courage to do that, because with people who constantly tell you, someone closest to you, like your father, saying, you're not going to ever come to anything. Look at your brother. He's an athlete. Look at how good he is. You're just a bunch of crap, basically, is what you're hearing. And in spite of that, to still go after your dream, that's really tough.
Passion is a word that means strong, fiery love. It actually originally meant to suffer with pain. But it kind of makes sense because you have a fiery, painful love for something. You need it.
And you're going to suffer.
Our next sentence says, Colwood residents are skeptical, and nearly everyone in town believes that their silly agency will fail.
They think it's silly because everybody in town works in the coal mines. If you don't work in the coal mine, you're not going to come to anything. So if you don't know any better, you're just going to think that there's no point in anything else.
Skeptical means to not believe something can or will happen.
You really doubt it.
Our next sentence says, the only person that encourages them to follow their dreams is their chemistry teacher, Miss Riley.
My reaction to that was, thank God for good teachers.
Yeah, a science teacher, educated. This person's probably rather quite smart at this time. Teaching is one of the best jobs most women can get. It makes sense that she would be an inspiration to other science-minded folks.
I have read so many stories, for example, of people who are children of immigrants, or they are Black, Hispanic, whatever, who were really saved by good teachers who encouraged them.
Agreed. Let's continue. She assigns them special projects so they can practice designing rockets.
All right. So the teacher is being very concrete about it, not saying, oh, you should study hard. It's good to study. She is actually helping them accomplish what it is they want to do.
The boys pour their hearts and souls into these assignments and start to improve their rocket building skills.
So what they really want to do is build rockets, and now they are actually building rockets. And with the encouragement and help of their teacher, they are getting somewhere with it. They're not just, doing something and then it fails and that's the end of it. She is helping push them to keep on improving it.
So another closely related word to rocket, of course, is missile, M-I-S-S-I-L-E. And a missile is a rocket that has a bomb on it. Missile comes from the Latin word that actually means to send. And the original meaning of missile means the presents that the emperor would throw to the poor people in order to kind of share the wealth and buy their love. And I love the idea of an emperor throwing presents today means the flying bomb.
So what a nice gift to send to somebody.
To Russia. To what was the saying?
From Russia with love.
Yeah. Okay, let's continue here. They convince a local blacksmith to help them create metal parts for the rockets.
That's back when they still had blacksmiths. Now, there were not many.
That caught my ear, too.
Yeah. But there were not many blacksmiths back then. But some people did still ride horses, so they still needed blacksmiths. They were not common already at this period. However, they still had some. And there are still some now, but very, very few.
Our next sentence says, after some failed attempts, they produce a special mechanism that speeds up launch times and makes their rockets fly faster.
So they're developing an important new mechanism, an important innovation. Now, that is something really amazing. One thing I need to mention is that the adjective is mechanical. The stress is on the second syllable. Mechanical, a mechanical arm, for example, of a robot. But the noun is different. It is not mechanism. And that's why the way almost every Taiwanese says it, the stress is on the first syllable. Mechanism, mechanism, mechanism. Do not say mechanism. It's mechanism, mechanism, mechanism.
And a mechanism, of course, is a tool in a machine that has a very specific use.
Let's move on to our last paragraph. Word soon spreads about their invention, and reporters travel to Colwood to find out more about the boys' rockets. So they have done something really amazing. They've succeeded, and people are hearing about it, so reporters want to come and report about it. They sniff out a good story. For word to spread, that means in Chinese you say 1 spreads to 10 and 10 spreads to 100. People are hearing about it. So the reporters are going to come out there and find out what's going on. Next sentence, hundreds of people gather in a field to witness the boys launch a rocket. Now that's really straightforward. So the boys are going to launch a rocket to demonstrate what they have put together, what they have built. And a lot of people are really interested, so they've come to watch. Sonny's father is reluctant to attend, but his wife convinces him to go. Now I can think of 2 reasons for this. First of all, is because he still doesn't believe in his son. He still thinks that, this is going to fail. This is not going to go anywhere. He's not going to be getting a real job. The second reason is because of his pride. Because he's put his son down so long, if he goes, he'll be admitting that he was wrong.
Yeah, to be hard-headed, to be pig-headed is to be a stubborn person. And Dad sounds and seems like he's rather stubborn.
And he has a lot of false pride. The rocket takes a long time to blast off, and many people believe it malfunctioned. So at this point, the father is probably thinking, see, I told you. Told you so. So it took a while to get going, but we'll find out what happens next. However, it eventually blasts off high into the sky. Now, here is a phrasal verb. Blast is to explode. But if we add off, that means there's a kind of explosion at the beginning, and then it takes off and flies high in the air in a certain direction to blast off. And blast off, that's when a rocket launches into the air, high into the sky, went up very high. Our last sentence, for the first time in Sonny's life, he sees that his father is proud of him. So his father probably got over that initial pride and putting his son down and realized, man, he did it. Look, that's my son. He did it.
Yeah, now he's running around telling everyone.
That's the way it works. That's the way it works.
Dad seems to be a guy that ignores hard work, but wants that success. He was really into his naturally gifted athlete of a son, and then he ignored the nerd math guy. And then now his son is being successful, and he's like, hey, check it out. And it seems like Sonny Hickam is happy that his dad accepts him. But to me, it's just man, why is Dad being so uncool this whole time?
That's right. And I think that's the most heartbreaking part, because especially when kids do not win affirmation and love from their parents, they go through life looking for it. That's the one thing in life I want, is for my father to affirm who I am. Just to say something like, wow, you did a good job. I'm proud of you. And some never, ever get that, and they die with a lot of regret.
Yeah, I agree. It's a difficult thing. Now, just before the end of today, I just wanted to add a little context to what we're talking about. Of course, we're talking about Sputnik, which flies off into space in 1957. And this may seem like ancient history to some people, but consider this. The first airplane took flight with the Wright brothers in 1903. In 1957, we shot our first rocket into space, and by 1969, people were walking on the moon. That is a 60-year gap between people learning to fly and standing on the moon. That is an incredible leap in technology.
So fast. And I remember that so well. In fact, I think I still have that newspaper at home. U.S. puts man on moon in a huge font. It's the headline of our local paper. I think I still have that paper. And so you think back to when we were really primitive and we didn't have all this technology. No, the 60s were a period of a very high level of development in technology. When I look back at TV programs from the 60s, and I've been watching The Twilight Zone lately, I think it's not so different. We already had a lot of technology back then. It's just gotten, a little fancier and taken a slightly different form. That's it for today, but we're going to keep on talking about Homer Hickam Jr. tomorrow. Make sure you tune in then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.